Cool. So, how's it going, guys? How's it going? So, as always, do you put the guys in the chat? Just loading into Slurp right now. The ownership or the touted guys.
Yep. It's there.
Okay. Yeah, so Ricky Fowler didn't get talked about at all. And I think that's very interesting. Is it because of his 2 missed cuts and everything like that? Because if it is, that's so stupid. Ricky Fowler is the perfect golfer everywhere. And
I think it's because of his 2 missed cuts.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, it has to be. There's really no other reason. I mean, when you look at Ricky Fowler on the surface, especially in terms of his recent form, I mean, he has 1 missed cut recently, and then he has 2 missed cuts at this tournament. So it's probably enough to scare people off of him. I mean, are you going to own a bunch of them, Zach?
All the Ricky Fowler this week for me.
Interesting.
I like being contrarian at top. I don't like to really separate myself a lot of other places. I just like to be able to get the lowest ownership guys at the top, and hopefully it works out. So I'm going to be high on Ricky Fowler. I'm going to be high on Mark Leishman, and just from that, I'm just going to go to the guys I really like this week. So a lot of HV3 as well. So it's going to be a interesting week for me personally.
Yeah, sounds like a high risk, high reward strategy though, which is what it's going to take. You know. Yeah.
So what are you looking at? How are you going to attack this ownership at the top?
Well, I think I've kind of made up my mind that I'm going to stay off of Charlie Hoffman for sure. He really does not project very well for me. It wouldn't surprise me if he's not too highly owned again this week. So I'm kind of sort of on the fence there. I don't know. Now that we talked a little bit about Ricky Fowler, I'm kind of second guessing myself there. But ultimately, I've got to make a choice, and I think I really like Justin Rose and Jason Day better in both cases.
Yeah, that's I'm about the same way with you right there, because I really love Justin Rose, but I don't know if I want to take him at 30% ownership this week, and that's kind of my thing. And I'd rather fade a guy who maybe won't perform this week, and hopefully Ricky Fowler does better than Justin Rose and Jason Day, and then I make up for that way. And that's a very high risk and high reward type scenario, because you don't really think Jason Day or Justin Rose will do that.
But do you think Jason Day and Justin Rose will both be at 30 or so percent?
I think Jason Day is going to be 35%, and then Justin Rose is going to be 25 this week. That's kind of how I'm taking their ownership. It
seems kind of tough to get. It's almost impossible to get both of them into a lineup, but it also seems pretty tough to get one or the other. Like Jason Day, I could see people getting off of him just because you have to, this is it's a field that drops off so heavy, and people are just gonna feel just unhappy with the lineups they end up making. I think with Jason Day in a lot of them.
So I'm going to be attacking this week in a balanced approach, GPP-wise. How are you going to be attacking it? Are you going to dip down into the 5K range, or are you going to dip down into 6K range?
A little bit, yeah. I won't have anybody. Last week, I think Jason Gore was he 6,000? I can't remember, but I had Jason Gore pretty heavily owned. I think I had him at 50% or so of my lineups, and then. I kind of worked around that, but this week I think I'm probably going to end up kind of splitting my ownership at the top. So I'll have a lot of Justin Rose, and I'll have quite a bit of Jason Day, but I won't have 80% of one person. Last week I had 80% of Charlie Hoffman, and I think I had 75% of Billy Horschel. So, I was really pretty heavily loaded up top. In this case, this week, I think I'm going to go a little heavier on some of the middle range guys and a little bit lower on the top price guys, just because I think there's more upside to hitting the middle of the price range this week.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I think at the end of the day you have to pick and choose up top, but I could very well see this tournament ending with, 2 or 3 of these guys in the top price range in the top 10, couldn't you?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's definitely going to be a week where you have to pick the top guys carefully, I think.
Yeah.
You can't be like, oh, I'm just going to, yeah. I definitely agree with you, and, I 100% agree with you going, from, the 8K range to the 7K range. You have to pick the guys that you definitely think you will have a great chance of doing well, and you don't want to get cute with it, fading those certain type of guys in that range, because just the differentiating factors between some of the 7K guys and some of the 8K guys is really huge, and you don't want to get cute with that, right? And you can probably make more of a chance to actually give yourself a better chance of getting higher in a GPP, maybe if you be a little bit more contrarian at the top this week, or maybe contrarian at the bottom. So mid price guys, I don't think is where you want to get cute with it.
Yeah, so Jason wants to know, does your strategy change at all in lesser fields like this? More stars scrubs because the top tier is much stronger than the middle field in comparison to better tournaments?
Personally, for me, I for events. That's just me, because I want to get guys who are going to be more optimal in a sense, and not try to get cute with it at all, trying to squeeze a couple 6K guys or 5K guys through the cut and sweating my ass off that way. How about you?
I think for me it just depends week to week. I think you can't. It's hard to answer that in a nutshell and say yes, I change it based on who's in the field one way or the other, because a lot of it depends on pricing, and it depends on how I feel ownership is going to look, and then it also depends on my projections. I mean, ultimately, I weigh my decisions pretty heavily on the projections I have, and there's a lot of good projections out there. But if there's somebody in the low range like Jason Gore last week, who I felt really comfortable with, I'll have a higher tendency to be more willing to load up on some of the higher price guys like I did last week. Mm-hmm. In a week like this, I don't really have anybody down low who I really love. There isn't anybody who stands out under 7K, maybe with the exception of Hudson Swafford, I think. But even that, I'm not really sold on.
Yeah,
not as much as I have been in the past.
It's really sketchy when you get under 7K. Jason Gore is all right. David Toms, I like. Roberto Castro is okay, but other than that, really, it's just really sketchy. Maybe Alex Chetka. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'm going to be focusing a lot more just above 7K than under. I just don't think it's worth. I think there's more risk than there is reward going down under 7K. I think this week.
Yeah,
but
don't play Alex Chetka.
I could be wrong.
Don't play him.
Don't play him?
He's the lowest projection in my model. Far and away the lowest projection. Yeah. He's projected for 8 points.
8 points?
Yep.
Awesome.
Don't do it.
Awesome. Don't do it. Oh,
yeah.
No, don't do it. So what are you doing personally this week? Are you going to be just focusing more above 7K then?
Yeah. So on a week like this where I don't feel really comfortable, what I'll typically do is I'll pick and choose some guys down low, and I'll put them in. I usually make 50 to 100 lineups, and I'll put them in at 4 to 6%, and then some of them I'll adjust slightly. Like if there's a guy who I hear being talked about who's really low priced, who's an example of that this week? Is there anybody who's on Oreo's list that's really low priced? Let's see.
Not really.
Maybe David
Toms.
Toms. Yeah. So like David Toms, I would expect him to be higher owned after seeing this. So if you like David Toms, and I don't hate him this week, but if I'm going to roster David Toms in my lineups this week, I don't want to put him in there at the normal 6 to 8% that I would of a guy in that low price range, because he may be 10 to 15% or higher. So if you do like David Toms, then you probably should put him in there at 15-20% or more, depending on how much you like him. But it's a mistake to go under what you think he's going to be owned.
Yeah, just make sure you have the full price of it, right? Like the full shares, and that's kind of
right.
Yeah, I like that tacking of it.
Right. Yeah.
So
what do you think of? Let's go into the next range. What are you thinking about? Kind of this 10 and 9K range.
I don't know. Billy Horschel, he's going to be my main guy in my cash games, but other than that, I like Smiley Kaufman as well in my cash games. Oh man, those are the two guys that I think you should focus heavily on cash games, maybe, and then maybe GPPs with Smiley Kaufman, because it seems like he was not talked about too much, so he's probably going to be around 10 to 15% ownership, and then Mark Leishman is going to be 5 to 7% ownership, and I think you could really attack him and be really well off, maybe in the long run, just because he is a guy who has a lot of high upside and can win for you, and no one ever gives Mark Leishman the respect he deserves. So if you're wanting to go contrarian in that 10 to 9K range, I think he's the prime example of that.
Yeah, I think the general consensus on Smiley Kaufman is that he's overpriced at 9,500, but he projects really well for me here. I really like him. I mean, he's got the skill, I think, to have winning potential here. It's not that inconceivable to see Jason Day finish 20th and somebody like Smiley Kaufman or Daniel Berger, some of these guys who are kind of in that mid-tier price range, pull out a win. The guy I like the most by far is Smiley Kaufman. Billy Horschel projects pretty well here for me too. I don't think I'll have a whole lot of him in GPPs, just because of his ownership. I expect him to be somewhat highly owned.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think about Chris Kirk? He
doesn't project well for me.
And
I mean, that's that's my biggest concern is he doesn't project well, which means for me he doesn't set up for this course very well. I think he's probably overpriced. He will go under owned, so he is sneaky. I mean, if you're looking for somebody who when they go off you're going to see a big advantage, you're looking at him. I mean, I just don't think that the upside is there. I don't think that there's
a table in there now, but I kind of like it out here.
I mean, do you think he has the potential to win? I mean, what do you think about that, Zach?
No, not at all. If you're going to go to Chris Kirk, I think you're getting too key with it.
Yeah,
I think that's the prognosis of it.
You've got Charles Howell III, who's almost over 1,000 cheaper. You've got Danny Lee, who's well over 1,000. I mean, I don't know. To me, there's guys below Chris Kirk that I think have a higher upside potential and are at a discount compared to him, if that makes sense.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Do you think Chucky 36 is going to be pretty highly owned, though, even though he's at 8,700? Because he's always touted to be the cut-making machine of this year and guaranteed top 25.
I've had kind of a hard time getting a feel for CH3's ownership for whatever reason this year. Seems like when I think he's going to be low owned is when he's high owned, and then vice versa, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure why that is. Maybe I just don't have a good feel for the pulse of the industry on CH3, but I don't know. I could very well see him being 20%.
Mm-hmm.
I could also see him being less than 10. You know, I mean.
Yeah, it's always a touchy scenario with Chucky 36, but I think I'm going to be focusing a bit more on him in cash games, and then not too much in GPPs maybe. But if I do focus in GPPs, I'm gonna, or maybe I'll focus a lot around him in GPPs and make him like my core guy. But I just don't know where to put him for ownership in an area. But like.
It's not a bad strategy, though. Just start almost all your lineups with CH3.
Yeah. It's not a bad
that.
idea, and people might think it's like a stupid area, but it's definitely a plus EV situation if you get Chucky 3-6 in the majority of your GPP lineups. I think. I mean, he doesn't miss the cut too often, so I think it could be a good way to go about it.
At 8,700, he probably doesn't kill you if he doesn't finish top 5 either. You know, I mean, if he's top 25, you're probably okay with it. You don't love it, but he doesn't necessarily rule you out of winning a GPP, I think.
Oh, most definitely. So. What people have been like touting Cameron Tringali a bit, and I think that's a bad way to go, and I think it's kind of deceiving with Cameron Tringali. Yeah, he has good course history, but he's been so out of form that I don't think that anybody should really trust him this week, even in GPPs. I think he makes a great fade, either in cash and GPPs. What do you think?
Oh, I don't know. I'm still a little bit torn on guys like Cameron Tringali who have this type of course history because, damn, it looks good. You know, I mean, it's hard to overlook the fact that he's got a whole bunch of top 20s, and you know, I don't know. I'm still not sold. I'm trying to do a little more research into how much course history actually matters. I know there's been tons and tons of debate out there. Based on the way I've played this season so far, it seems like the only time course history is really significant and a good predictor is when you have a long amount of data, and you know, looks like he's got 6 years worth of event history here, one miscut. To me, that feels like it's probably relevant. It's hard to say for sure. It also doesn't mean that you can't have perfect course history and miss a cut. You know, so there's something to be said about that too. Personally, I'm going to be fading him. He just doesn't project well enough for me here. The ones that I really like, Charlie Hoffman last week was a perfect example where my projections stood out for Charlie Hoffman, and then you know you see the course history he had last week, and that's where I think the course history makes me just want to load up on a guy like Charlie Hoffman. You know, it's not necessarily why I picked him, but as supplemental information, it gave me more confidence in being able to agree with what my research tells me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
But to answer your question, I'm probably not going to be on Cameron Tringali.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad you said that. And it's kind of crazy. How does Morgan Hoffman set up in your in your projections? Because everybody's like, "Oh, I'm going to have so much Morgan Hoffman." I think that's just a stupid thing. I really do. I don't know about you, but I just think it's so stupid because he doesn't check out at all for the course. And yeah, he might have like decent course history, but he's Morgan Hoffman.
Yeah. So I won't be playing Morgan Hoffman, and it's a little bit interesting because his projection based on his 2016 stats is really good.
What?
But his 2015 projection is really bad. So I never know how to handle these situations. I actually just got done doing a bunch of spending a lot of time trying to answer the question of how much do you weight 2015 versus 2016 stats, and does it change throughout the season?
So
the answer I got was more confusing than going into it. So I don't know.
Jake Nichols, I think. Josh Nichols, Jacob Nichols, something. He does like stat and projections and whatever for like professional golfers like Danny Willett at the Masters, and he was talking about if you want like the most accurate like type of stats, you combine like 2 years of stats and you go off that and make your judging that way. So it's he was kind of explaining it as regression back to the mean in a sense. So going back to their average form. So it kind of levels it out if they're like performing bad for one season in one area, then performing better in one aspect or another, and kind of going on with that. So maybe you should try that. But yeah, I just hate Morgan Hoffman so much. I don't think he should do well at all.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. I don't like him this week, but I'll be rostering him for sure. I mean, throughout the season, I have and I will again. I'm sure. Whether or not he can win is yet to be determined, I think. But
I mean, even if he can win or not, I just don't think he's a good player. This is a course where you need to be able to. You can't bomb this course. That's what I'm trying to say. But like, if you go into it, every Pete Dye course sets up in one aspect, and that aspect is if you hit it into a certain spot, you're going to get rewarded, and if you don't, you're going to get screwed over. And I think Morgan Hoffman does not fit that bill for a Pete Dye course, and maybe last year he came into this a lot better form and so on and so forth, but he's not this year. He's been struggling with everything, so I just don't really think that he's going to do well. That's kind of how I'm thinking it, and I'd rather go a lot other areas than go on Morgan Hoffman if I'm going to go in the 6K range.
So the one thing that he does fairly well through at least through 2016, from what it looks like, is his long approaches.
Putting.
Well, yeah, and putting too, but his approaches from outside 200 seems like he plays under par, pretty significantly under par. So but this is part of why I'm a little bit hesitant when I see guys who have hugely different projections from 2015 stats versus 2016 stats, because there could be that stat from the PGA website could have only registered 3 recorded from outside 250 or something. You know what I mean? So there could be a lot of variance to that. So D. Weiss wants us to rank some guys here. What do you think? You want to go back and forth, or you want to pick a guy to talk about, or how do you want to do this?
So he's asking us to rank him. So from ranking, I'd probably go Luke List, Kazire, Donaldson, Woodland, Hearn, Martin. How about you?
Say that one more time.
Luke List, Kazire, then Woodland, and Donaldson, Hearn, Martin.
So I think I like Luke List a lot. My biggest concern with List is that I think he's going to end up being really popular this week. Early on, I had him probably 60% or so owned in my lineups, and then I pivoted off of him to Lucas Glover, who we can talk about in a sec. But I think of those, I would rank List first, and then I like I kind of like Gary Woodland on this course. How do you think he fits with this course, Zach?
So what I really like about Gary Woodland is he doesn't try to bomb it on every hole, and he tends to be more a guy who wants to be able to place it in certain areas and still have that length. So I think going on to it, I think he could really take advantage of this course if he stays patient with himself. And if he does that, I think he could really skyrocket up the leaderboard. But going into it, if he doesn't stay patient, it's going to be really hectic for him. That's my aspect with it for him. But I definitely agree with you on Luke List. And I just want to say, I'm just going to keep on saying it. Who was talking about Luke List first? Me. Fantasy Golf Degenerates podcast. Just saying.
Where you get all the gold.
We get all the gold. But kind of going into it, like going to segue off of Luke List, if you, I'm going to go on to HV3 off of Luke List. If you look at it, they're almost identical in the way their stats align. It's really intriguing to me. It's literally almost identical. Like Luke List is better in bogey avoidance and scrambling, and that's it. And like every other platform, it's basically the same. It's really interesting. They have the same amount of top 10s, have the same amount of top 25s, and then basically the same amount of missed cuts, and people are flocking to Luke List and not with HV3. So it's kind of an interesting situation. If people are saying Luke List fits this course really well, why can't Harold Varner III fit this course really well? That's my argument right there, and I think HV3 really sets up for this course really well. I really do. And it's he's definitely a
good argument.
Yeah. It's really interesting though, right? If you really look into like all the stats, they're literally almost exactly alike. Maybe like Luke List is better in a few like 40 plus like standings better, and then you go somewhere else and HV3 is better in some certain circumstances. But if you just kind of look at it, it's very, very close to being identical, and I think HV3 can really do well this week. And I know I always overhype HV3 because I love him so much. But I genuinely do feel that if you're going to be playing Luke List, why not HV3? I mean, it literally just go look at it, and you'll be amazed how like similar they are. It's really interesting, and I feel that HV3 can really be a good play this week. And coming off a ninth place finish last week, it's really going to be something that you really want to look out for, and you'd rather get on the train right now than later. That's what I'm just have to say about that.
So going back to this list, I'll just give my rankings really quick. I like List first, then I like Martin, Woodland, Kazire, Donaldson, and Hearn. A couple people asking about Donaldson. He projects really, really well for me on this course.
Yeah,
so it's kind of interesting. I think I overlooked him a little bit, probably more than I should, on my lineup building, kind of when I was going through that. But you know, he's got 6 straight made cuts. He has a miscut here in his first time out. Worth mentioning also that this is a course that typically does not punish first-timers. So something to think about when you look at guys like Patton Kazire, who I really like this week. It's his first time out at this event on this course. So it's not ordinarily the type of course that's going to lead to an almost automatic miscut like we see, you know, at places like Augusta. People aren't familiar with the course, and it sort of punishes newcomers, first-timers. Mm-hmm. This course historically has not really been that way. There's been a lot of people actually who have finished fairly well in their first time out. Not necessarily even extremely skilled people, just a lot of golfers have finished top 25 in their first time out really consistently. Something to think about.
Yeah, it's really interesting to look at. It's kind of like an anomaly in a sense, because there has been so many like first timers who have done well, and a lot of people get their first win here as well. So it's really interesting to kind of think about and look at, and it doesn't really punish bad putters as well if you kind of get a little heavy into the past winners and so on and so forth. So I think it really gives ball strikers the advantage here more than anything else. So guys like Shez Reavie, I think could really do well here, and he burned me a lot last week, but I'm going to be on him again. Bad putter, great ball striker, could really have an advantage here. So I think just going on to it, if you're just going to look at a few things, look at guys who are great ball strikers, and you're going to have a great week this week, I think.
Yeah, and like Zach said, statistically, putting matters very little based on my model, also based on what I've heard other people in their analysis say. Kind of an interesting week.
It really is. It so is. There's so many nuances that you have to think about and not think about, in a sense. Like, you don't want to get too heavy into the stats and be so far in the weeds. You kind of have to step back and say, okay, here's the things that you really want to look at and how to approach this week. And yeah, it's really interesting to look at. It really is.
Yeah.
So let's kind of get into that 7K range. Who do you think is going to be a guy? Oh, oops, we got a question. All right, so favorite play around 6.6K, Langley or Baldwin or Hoagie or Goose. So I really like Langley this week, and like I think he's going to be really low owned. I'm not saying it's a great play. I'm just saying it because I think personally I could benefit from it. I don't know. Like, it's a incredibly risky play. That's all I'm saying. And he changed irons last week, and he switched to PXG irons from his TaylorMade PSIs. And last week he's never done well at the Valero, and he's never broke par there. And then after switching to the PXG irons, he suddenly gets like a top 10.
Comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that has to do a lot with just having some clubs that you can actually play with. And I know like the saying is like the person shooting arrow is better than like the arrow or whatever. I can't remember the exact saying, but you know what I'm like trying to say. But equipment really matters, and if someone doesn't feel comfortable with it, they're not going to do well with it. And if they find something they really enjoy playing, it's going to give them more confidence, and they're going to be more willing to really attack like pins and everything like that, and be more fearless going forward. And maybe that's what's the change with the PXG irons is that it's kind of a hot take right there, but I'm going to be attacking it for whatever it's worth. But I think,
I like it, and we've seen other guys with the PXG club change come out of nowhere. I mean,
Chucky 3 Sticks has been playing lights out ever since he switched to PXG. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there I think is something to that. This isn't kind of a flyer, you know. I mean, this is starting to become something.
Yeah, I mean, like Patrick Reed is switching to PXG. It looks like there was pictures of him sneaking a PXG wedge in his bag, and he has a PXG driving iron. So maybe next year you'll see him switch all the way to PXG. So
yeah,
I mean, a lot of these guys are wanting to play PXG because it's the best clubs they personally feel, and PXG as a company doesn't recruit tour players. That all the players come forward to them. So it's kind of a interesting thing to kind of think about. But I like Hoagie. I really do love Hoagie. He checked out for me last week, and he paid off dividends for whoever played him because I didn't play him, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But What do you think? Who do you like?
So the two guys in this kind of price range that really jump off the map for me are Hudson Swafford, who we talked a little bit about earlier. He plays really well in par threes. He plays well from 200 plus. Seems like the type of guy that sets up well for this course based on my statistical model. And then kind of sneaky Greg Owen. So Greg Owen has actually played pretty well this year in a lot of events. And he is definitely the type of golfer that can manage the game. So he's not somebody I'm going to go all in on. I like Hudson Swafford far better than Greg Owen, but Greg Owen has played this course quite a bit. He on paper seems to set up fairly well here. At this price, you're pretty happy with any kind of made cut, and to me, it seems like he has pretty good chance of doing that and possibly finishing even better than just a made cut.
Yeah, I'm not personally going to be targeting Greg Owen, but I definitely like your thoughts on him, man. I love Hudson Swafford this week, and he's missed 6 straight cuts in a row or something like that.
Yeah.
So he's going to be very low owned, and this is definitely a course where he could really pop back up again, and could pay you huge dividends in his price, and he's definitely a guy who could really get you a top 25. There's no question about that. So it's a high risk, high reward situation with Hudson Swafford, but I think the safest play out of what D-Wise is wanting, I think Tom Hoge is going to be his guy out of Langley, Baldwin, Retief. Retief could be really good. He's been cut-making machine as well, but I think Tom Hoagie's where it's at.
Yeah. Oh, the other guy, a little bit lower price, worth mentioning, I think, is Scott Pinkney. He projects really well for me as well.
Yeah.
And I know you've talked about him. I think you talked about him on the podcast this week. But first time out at this event, he had a 12th place finish. Really sets up well for this course statistically. Seems like the type of guy who could pull out another top finish, and at this price, you're through the roof if he does.
Yeah, for sure. I really love Scott Pinkney and the way he plays. It's just really unfortunate that you can't string it together for 4 rounds. He always has this one blow-up round, it seems like. Mm-hmm. But if he can just get through 4 rounds, he's going to be like a top 10 guy for you. I mean, he is an elite player. It's just he can't string it together for 4 rounds. It's kind of sad to see him because he's such a talented player and he has such a great swing, and hopefully he can maybe break out in a win this week. I definitely like that play. So, why does everyone like David Toms this week? Are you serious? The guy's good.
It's his course history. I mean, he's made 8 cuts in a row here.
Well,
I think that's a big part of it.
Well, in my way, I'm not even taking account to course history. He's ranked 9th in my model, and I have 0% of tournament form. And if you look at it, strokes gained to the green, he's 28th. Bogey avoidance, he's 11th. Mm-hmm. Par 4 scoring, he's 22nd. Good drive percentage, he's 54th. And then scrambling, he's ranked 1st. Sand saves, he's 1st. Strokes gained putting, he's 51st. Total putts, he's 49th. Total procs, he's 10th. Procs from 200 plus, he's 34th. I mean, that's why everybody likes him. His course history definitely wants, it's going to flock everybody to him. But from a statistical standpoint, he's a great play. He really is.
Yeah. So, like we talked about earlier, I think that type of scenario when when your model looks really good and then you see a course history that's really good, to me, that's the time that I like to really take some risks and pile onto somebody.
Yeah.
The problem with Tom's is I don't know that he has winning upside. I think in a field like this, where short of the top couple guys, there's potential for a win. It's kind of hard to want to take too much of a guy like David Toms, who I think realistically probably doesn't have that much upside. But in a format like cash games, then by all means pile on, and I probably will have David Toms in my cash lineup.
It looks like we kind of skipped over a question. Anyone on Donaldson this week? I switched out Siwoo Kim for him. Yeah, get on Donaldson. He's a great play. I'd rather have him than Siwoo Kim, honestly. And I think you agree, right, Brett?
I do. Yep, 100%.
All right.
I do. So at 6.7K, you don't necessarily need a win. But, in a field like this, when you look at historically, this is the type of field where, and it's the type of event where it's pretty open. I mean, you see a lot of guys in the, course history when you look back. There's a lot of top tens out of guys who are, guys like Jeff Overton, Luke Guthrie, Eric Compton, Ken Duke's got a couple of them. I mean, a lot of these guys are low-priced golfers. So I guess my point wasn't that you necessarily need to have a guy at 6.7K who's got winning upside, but in a field and a course where you see these lower-priced guys consistently finish in the top 10, at least some of them every year, it feels like an event where you're going to have some of that. I mean, if Jason Day or Justin Rose or both of them don't win or come top 5, you're going to have some of that top 5 upside out of some of these lower priced guys in your lineups, especially this week.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think Nick Taylor might pull it off this week. I think he's another guy who can
really
take it. Yeah, he showed it that last week. I mean San Antonio, TPC San Antonio is not a walk in the park, and you need a course where you can really be able to attack the fairways properly, and he did that last week, and I think this could be another week where Nick Taylor can really tear it up.
Interesting.
I mean, he showed up high, he showed up really high in my model, and he came out balling. I mean, I basically set up my model from that Pro Golf synopsis. And from this last 4 weeks, it's been really getting on guys, low-priced guys who've been really hitting high, and Nick Taylor's back on it again. I think that he could really do well this week, and so we basically skipped the entire 7K range.
Yeah, we did. That's true.
So, who are you going to be targeting in this range? Do you think?
Well, I've got a lot of Luke List. We talked about him a little bit earlier on. I think that may be beating a dead horse to go back. So one of the flyers, and this is projection related, is Patrick Rogers. There isn't really much outside of just my projections that I have to sort of back up my Patrick Rogers call. But statistically, through this year and 2015 projections, he is just off the map in terms of his projections, and I'm not really sure. I'd kind of have to open up that chest of statistics to sort of figure out what's telling us that. But he's going to be low owned, I imagine. I can't imagine he's going to be very popular.
He burned me so bad last week. Oh my God!
Yeah, a lot of people. A lot of people had him last week. But I mean, is this course so much different than last week?
No.
I don't think it really is. I mean,
I think it's the last 3 weeks. It's been so similar. I haven't changed my model once, one bit at all. The last 3 weeks. Yeah. I haven't really changed it that much. I'll focus a little bit more on driving distance this week, but last week I focused more on good drive percentage. So I flip flop around with the yardages a little bit and things like that. But all in all, I'm not changing it too much. Like 99% of it's the same.
Yeah. Yeah. I really don't think they're all that different, and for some of the same reasons that I liked Patrick Rogers a little bit last week, I like him this week too. It's pretty simple as that. I don't really think I don't think I'm going to have to go back and kind of pick that one apart. I'm just going to let the statistics do the talking on that one, and I'll take him.
Yeah, statistically, he's just fucking amazing. He really is.
Yeah.
I like whenever I roster Patrick Rogers, I always get burned. So I'm never going to roster him again. And if he wins, I'm okay with that. I'm just going to be fading him outright. But I definitely see merit in your argument and the way you're thinking about it, and I 100% agree. And if people don't really play him, that's kind of a stupid mistake, and I am making a stupid mistake, but I'm not going to play him this week. I'll admit it. I am stupid for it. But you got a question for you.
Okay.
Why do you like Stanley so much based on your ownership posted later? Or earlier?
Yeah. So I think he will be low owned in that price range. He's right by Sung Yul No, who won a couple years ago. I think people will gravitate to him for whatever reason, or at least I'm hoping. He's near Luke List in price. He's near Patrick Rogers in price. He's near some guys I think that'll take up some of his ownership percentage. He projects really, really well for me. And I'm kind of recently developing my GPP strategy a little bit to be more aggressive. As I build my bankroll up and as I feel more comfortable taking risks, I'm going to kind of pick guys like this that I feel like have a shot to have the upside of winning a GPP lineup. And to me, I'm not 100% on this, and I will probably adjust some of these ownership percentages before the whole thing is said and done, but feels like Kyle Stanley is going to be one of those guys that's way overlooked, and if 43% of my lineups have Kyle Stanley and he finishes top 10, I got a really, really good shot at taking down a GPP.
Yeah, for sure.
Does that make sense, Zach? Does that sound reasonable?
Sounds reasonable. I'm actually trying to scale back and not be so aggressive. I'm trying to be more thought-provoked about my lineups instead of going balls to walls like I have been the last few months, and like the last couple of weeks it's paid off a little bit better. And so I'm hoping I'm honestly I'm going to be so aggressive on HV3 this week. It's going to be crazy. I'm probably going to have him 30-40% on this week, and I seriously feel that he's a great play. But I really like how you're attacking it. I really do. Let's kind of talk about a couple guys that we like in this 7K range, and then let's build a GPP lineup and a cash game lineup. Right. I am just going to name off guys I personally think are going to do well, like GPP wise and cash game wise. David Hearn, cash game, really solid stats all around in his course history. Everyone's going to flock to him. Jerry Kelly, cash foul ball guy. He hasn't really had good course history, but he's in pretty decent form, and I feel like he could definitely make the cut here and do well. Shez Reavie, ultimate GPP play. I'm going to be heavy on him. Great stats, ball striker, could get his first one here. Same with Luke List. Kyle Ripers, same type of boat for me. John kind of been in a funk a little bit, but I think he could come out of here, could attack this really well in HV3. Already told you guys, Lucas Glover, if he can putt this week, he wins it by 50 strokes. He
doesn't need to putt this week.
That's so true. So
the
true.
stats literally say that the worst putters do better on this course.
Yeah.
So something to think about.
Yeah. So just stock up on Lucas Glover this week.
Yeah. One other guy I think that's going to go really overlooked in the low 7K range is Hunter Mahan. I think that he has winning potential. I mean, I know he's not the same golfer we all kind of think of Hunter Mahan, but boy, statistically, he looks really good here. He's a pretty volatile golfer. I'm not sure I would put him in cash lineups, but geez, he doesn't have a whole lot of course history here. He's going to go really low owned, and in terms of just kind of value, intrinsic talent, I think he is far and away one of the top golfers in this price range. I think you're getting a pretty good deal for $7K guy.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I definitely agree. Any other guys that you want to talk about in the 7K range?
No, I think that's it. Let's get into making some lineups.
All right. You want to do GPP or?
Yeah, I'll fill out my listener league lineup again.
Sounds awesome.
How's that sound?
Sounds great. All right, so you went first last week. I'll go first this week. So I'm going to be chalky and go with. Actually, no. Let's go Ricky Fowler. Balls to the wall, Ricky Fowler.
All right, now one lineup that I'll have with Ricky Fowler. Okay, I love it. All right, so let's drop down because I know you guys didn't talk about him on the podcast. Let's put in Hunter Mahan. And yes, Wilcox is definitely worth a shot in GPPs. I think this is the type of tournament you want to target guys like Will Wilcox. He's got upside. I mean, he's got top 10 potential here for sure. If he finds his game and plays well, he seems like a pretty good look on this course.
I like
Sorry.
it. I like it. I like Wilcox this week. I'm going to be taking a couple shots at him. All right, let's see. Let's go. Okay. Sorry. I'm trying to find him. Sorry. There we go. Mark Leishman.
Mark Leishman. Really trying to make
Leishman.
me feel bad about myself this week, huh? I see how it is. Mark Leishman. Okay.
I love Mark Leishman.
Okay, I could get on board with that. So that leaves us about 7,600 remaining. Let's see. Do I want to be nice to you or do I want to be mean to you?
Be a dick. You can be a dick.
Let's go CH3. Let's do it. Did you guys talk about CH3 on the podcast? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
So that leaves us 7,050. Yeah.
I will get on. Let's see. Scott Langley. Let's do it. Scott Langley is going to pull it out this week.
Scott Langley. Okay. Bold call. Balls
to the wall. Balls to the wall.
All right, let's give Kyle Stanley a go. 11 of 15 made cuts.
Let's do it.
The last 15 showings this year. He's right in that price range. Let's do it.
This lineup's gonna win a GPP. Just saying.
Yeah, it's gonna win the listener league GPP, and then you're gonna have to review my lineup that you helped me make, and I'm gonna claim that it was all mine, and I had no help.
No
so
help
that
at
nobody,
all.
yeah, nobody will know. Not a single person.
All right, let's get into the cash game. All right.
Cash game.
I went first.
All right.
I went first last week. You can go first this week.
All right. I really had trouble making a cash lineup that I felt happy with.
Yeah, it's hard
so far this week. I'm still probably going to end up tinkering with mine. Why don't we start out with I know you don't usually like to take the top price guys. Let's go CH3.
No, you can go top price. It's all good.
All right, Justin Rose.
All right.
That's the decision I'm having trouble with. I think is that I really like Justin Rose in cash. It's whether or not I like the resulting lineup that includes him that I'm really struggling with.
Okay, if you're going to have a cash lineup this week, it has to have David Toms. So, David Toms it is.
I'll get on board with that. I will get on board with that. What does that leave us at? I'm not typing this one in. So.
7,875.
7,875. All right. Boy, I don't know. I'm lost already. Okay.
It's hard.
I know. So what do you think about Will the Thrill in cash this week?
Sure. Let's do it. Why not?
Well, that wasn't the debate I was expecting.
It's really risky with Will Wilcox, I think, in cash.
Well, that's why I was asking.
Me.
All right, let's go Stuart Appleby. We'll go the epitome of low risk, right? He's got great course history here.
He does. I didn't even look at. Really.
He came in with a 21st last week. His course history is as follows: 6th place, 45th, 47th, 17th. Never missed a cut.
2K. All right, I'm gonna get on Chucky. That leaves us at 7,900.
7,900.
Yeah.
All right. Ben Martin. I like Ben Martin as a cash option.
Ben Martin.
People don't realize he's actually a lot more consistent than people think. When you look at long spans. Me. Why?
Because it's Ben Martin.
Yeah, I mean the only time he misses cuts are on bomber courses, and right now he's missed 2 cuts in 15 weeks, and both of them were on bomber courses.
Yep.
Like he's a much better cash option than people think.
All right. How are you feeling on Gary Woodland?
Do it.
Woodland in cash?
Don't think, just do.
I'm going to be playing. I'm going to be playing this lineup. Like we're 2 of 3 ever since we've been doing this. Yeah. So let's do it. Okay, that leaves 8K. Nope, we're done. Okay, so our cash lineup is Justin Rose, David Toms, Stuart Appleby, Charles Howell III, Ben Martin, Gary Woodland. It's going to be 3 or 4 after this week. Let's do it.
3 or 4. All right. They want you to post the lineup in the chat.
So, all right. Hold on. All right. So Appleby, Toms, Woodland. Hold on. Martin. Rose. And that's okay. Chucky. And then our GPP. Whoops. Sorry. All right, then our GPP lineup is Fowler, Chucky, Langley, Leishman, Mahan, and Stanley.
Doesn't that just give you a warm, fuzzy feeling on the inside?
Dude, it's going to be so good. It's going to be so good. It's going to be so contrarian. It really is.
Yep.
All right. Guys. I'll type up the remaining lineup. Other than that, guys, good luck this week. And stay tuned for the next show with Steven from Fantasy Golf Metrics and Brad since Bobby can't make it. So, good luck this week, guys.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for listening.
Love you.
So do I stay on or what? Help me, I'm lost. All right. So now we get to talk about data. Is Steven? Can you hear me? Oh, okay. I'm gonna get something to drink here.
All right, and glad to be on here. I know Brad just stepped away to grab himself a cold one. Bobby will be on. He may not be able to talk, but he will be chatting. He'll be listening. Yeah, let me let's get over to the chat here. I got that up. Chat going. No. I'd love, you might be able to sneak a couple comments in. We'll see. He's trapped in the office tonight, so. But I saw you guys going over some lineups. I caught a tail end there, and I'll wait for Brad to get back in here. Yeah, I'm sure he will. Actually, is Brad on here? Brad just got out. What happened? Yeah, we could talk about Leishman. So I heard some comments from the last chat. When Wednesday comes, I get home from the real life job, and then I sit down at the computer and I look at all the numbers, and I kind of just prep myself for a few hours of golf conversation, which is phenomenal. And this week's pretty interesting to me. I mean, the prices are definitely interesting. It's one of the first times I really don't love. I mean, you don't love anyone under 6,000, but I don't see anyone under 6,000 that I'm excited about taking a shot on. Maybe one or two guys in the sixes, but there's a couple guys in the sevens that I really like. Strong opinion about our top end guys. I just don't know which ones to play. I have made one or two lineups with Fowler and Rose and Day and Rose and Day and Fowler, basically common on those two. Wilkinson, he is a guy that's popped up in a couple spots, and I got all my cheat sheets in front of me so I can go into that. He is in our second class, which is only about 30 people deep. So he's a guy that at 6,000 is probably the cheapest guy that we're going to promote. I mean, Sung Kang creeps into the top of the third at 6,100. He definitely Wilkinson, he's checking off in the data that gets him to that spot. At 6,000 he's ranked third in our PGAP, which all of you remember is points gained against price. So he's averaging just over 15 points more than someone priced at 6,000, which is a pretty hefty number. It's actually the third ranked PGAP in the field. So he's 2 or 3 cuts recently, 3 or 4 at this event, and we actually weighted course history a little lower this week because, as you guys see, a lot of first-time winners, a lot of guys that have not played well, that have played well that didn't have any experience here. So we took a little bit of that weight off for that factor. But he's 13th in key stats, which is, it's pretty significant because, yeah, it's not that strong a field, but when you're 13th in key stats, you have 12 people ahead of you. So who are those 12 people? Ricky Fowler, Jason Day, Justin Rose, Mark Leishman, Charlie Hoffman, who's hot, Billy Horschel, Gary Woodland, ball strikers, Aaron Baddeley, which is phenomenal because Aaron Baddeley is a guy that is known for putting, but obviously he's showing up a lot in the last few weeks. He's been playing pretty well. And you get some big names that are just ahead of him in key stats. So to drop in next with Tim Wilkinson is pretty interesting there. Two guys that I'm keen on. I don't know if you guys happen to see, since this is a data show. In addition to the survival guide, we put out, I think what I call it this week, the absurdly crazy awesome round by round data. Because listen, that's what it is. We try and put together our a real neat platform with the survival guide and all our tools. The round by round data, we have the ability to put it out there, but to make it look as nice as some of the other stuff we do, it would just be a lot. So we don't mind having a little fun with it because it's just a ton of data. It lets you guys look at a lot of different things, and it's interesting.
How's it going, man?
Hey, what's going on, Rep?
Dude, I could listen to you talk about stats for hours. I was just loving it.
Good. Yeah, thanks for coming on. I mean, Bobby's actually on if you see the chat. He's going to be listening, and he can type, but he can't talk. That's the only thing right now.
Oh, okay. So the ghost of Bobby is still here.
He's still there. He's lingering. But yeah.
Okay. Well, he can correct me for all of the things that I'm wrong on. How about that?
But Bobby, listen. The thing I like about Bobby is we spent a lot of time talking, obviously. But a good example of what I think helps us balance each other out is I came in there. One of the guys on the chat asked about Wilkinson. I ran through some kind of overarching numbers, and he came in and basically said, hey, you know what? Like, the data looks strong in one way for Wilkinson, but if you look at it this way, he's 4 or 5 rounds losing strokes against the field tee to green, and I think everyone's pretty much in agreement that this is a week where tee to green is going to matter. So, that's the kind of stuff that we're trying to dig into, and we're getting closer. As you guys see, we're adding more stuff, and we're trying to tailor what we do to make it accessible to people. So, we've found a lot that round by round data really paints a better picture of where a guy's trending. So, the more the data gets, the more you can kind of get a sense of how well someone's playing, we think.
So one of the questions I always have when I look through all your guys' stats is, what are some of the ways that you go about kind of breaking all of that information down? I assume you guys play lineups yourself. Do you play quite a bit of volume on DraftKings?
I would love to play more volume, but I just, I don't. By the time Wednesday comes and all the work I put in, I'm in like the 10 to 15 to 20 lineup range. Bobby is in that same spot. He always does he does the $300 every week though. So he does the 300. He does a few 33s. He does 10, 15, $3. I do more of a bunch of 33s, $3. I do some cash games, stuff like that. But I would say, we're still working on some things with the model that we want to feel a little better about, and then I don't feel comfortable building so many lineups. Although I do get frustrated when I see 5 of 6 from all of my lineups when the right configuration would have easily net me 6 of 6. That's the one thing I notice is by not playing all the lineups, you can be on the right guys, but it's been a real hard season in my mind going 6 of 6. I feel like I'm 5 of 6 on every lineup. Which listen, it generally cashes, but when you're playing GPP, who cares if you make $6 on 3 or $50 on 33? I mean, listen, Bobby, you make $700 on a 300. It's not bad, but if you're happy with that, then you got to play cash, and 5 of 6 is going to win you a ton of cash money. So
I mean, you're looking for that perfect combination in GPPs. I mean, when it comes down to it, that's why people do what they do. That's why you see a lot of these pros pile in just multiple massive amounts of lineups because they're, confident in their picks, but they're also looking for that right combination when they pick right, you know?
Yeah, and it's tough. I mean, we had all kinds of Charlie Hoffman and Ricky Barnes last week. I mean, Bobby had a 6-6 lineup without Hoffman, and then he had a 5-6 with, and they both were just deep in the money in the 33.
Man.
So it's listen, it's interesting because the fields are larger. It's become more popular. We've really tried to work on the game theory, the ownership percentage. We feel like we've gotten a really good grasp on that. Bobby and I were talking a ton this past week on, there might be someone that's 7,000 or 7,500 that you feel good about, but if he's going to be 20% or more owned, it's just you're still not getting the value, because if you're going to get that ownership level, like, you need to really feel like you're going to guarantee yourself a top 10 when it comes to PP. So that's what's kind of we've been talking about a lot. We feel like we've got a pretty good system in place to identify who's playing well, but now it's about picking the right guys in the right spots.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately you can have perfect information, or at least as perfect as it will get in golf, but ultimately, that's kind of why I asked the question I did, because ultimately it's our responsibility to take that information and to translate it into winning lineups. And there's, I think, more to that than a lot of people realize, and for me it's been a learning curve for sure. I mean, I still feel like I'm trying to develop my craft and take in all the information I take in every week, including my own projections, and just trying to convert that into something that is, a positive expectation or winning long term is, there's a lot of little variables that go into it.
And it's a ton of process based, thinking, and we're huge in that. Like we used to, when we first came on the scene and what we were doing, you want to have success. You want to make sure people think you're good, and we get really down on ourselves if we had one of our top guys play poorly, because when we came out, we actually had a lot of success early on, and now we're kind of over that. We have bad weeks, we have good weeks, but we keep the same process in place, and we realize long term that's going to help. We don't have knee-jerk reactions to a bad week, and we've been on a pretty good roll recently. We the things that we're starting to identify as important for building lineups and identifying value, we have a pretty good grasp on. We've really focused in on tee to green numbers. What we're looking for are guys that are consistently gaining strokes against the field, and maybe not with the putter. Maybe an average putter, maybe a little below average, maybe have a history of getting hot, because those are the guys that people aren't on because the results aren't there. But we think that there's more consistency in ball striking than there is in putting. So we found a lot of value in going after those types of guys.
Sure. Yeah, you see that in the resulting data every week too. I mean, there's a lot of variability in putting, even from course to course.
Yeah.
That it's when you're looking for that consistency, there's I think more predictive statistics in terms of consistency for sure than putting.
Respond to one of these guys. They're asking about if the guy.
Question.
So yeah, it's been.
Am I in the wrong chat?
Yeah. Yeah. So they moved over to the chat that we're on. That's why you probably don't see it.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, one of them mentioned Goosen, and listen, he's not like a slam dunk, but he is a guy that has some converging trends. Where is he? Yeah, he's 7-7 cuts, averaging 60.4 DraftKings points over the time frame. He's 4 or 5 cuts here. He's going to rank number 2 in points gained against price, second in value. He's a guy that, at 6,500, I feel pretty good about. I don't think the ownership's going to be anything crazy. He's a guy that, the ball striking isn't great right now, but what we saw at the price range of 6,500 and below is there aren't that many guys that pop off the page ball striking wise and tee to green numbers. So, overall form, I mentioned earlier the course history, we're not on as much this week, but he has it. I think he's as safe a value as I feel comfortable saying someone's safe at 6,500 right now.
So the data you're using is it a 12-week rolling average? Is that right?
Yeah, for most of the snapshots, we're looking at a 12-week, the last 12 events on tour.
Okay.
Because some of the tools that we have.
Because one of.
Go ahead.
One of the questions that I've kind of sought out to answer for myself, at least, I'm using both 2015 and 2016 projections. Tried recently to sort of answer the question as to how much weight do I put into 2015 versus 2016. Which one is more accurate? Does it change throughout the year? Those types of questions. It sounds like your 12-week rolling average is kind of a way to get around that.
It is and it isn't. So one of the things that we're working on, and because we'll admit when we find that there's a better way to do things, we want to make sure we do it that way, and we're looking to put in a factor of reversion. And I think that's kind of what you're getting to there. Something where like we'll look at a 12-week average, and then we'll weight that along with, say, their 2-year average or their 1-year average, and get a blended average that way, and that kind of helps control for someone that's maybe a little too hot, the hot hand fallacy, basically. And we haven't done it yet, but as you see, we do a lot of Excel stuff. It's just me and Bobby. We don't have a team of developers, anything like that. So we're looking to work with some people that maybe have a little more computer savvy, because we've been able to compile a good amount of information, and we want to display it correctly. So to keep up what we do week by week, this is what we have, but we will be the first to admit that we actually have a couple better methods we'd like to put in place. We just actually have to do the work to get it there. So one thing I don't think many people talk about is the conversion rates on putting, different putting distances. Guys that are gaining a ton of these strokes putting by making bombs, that's something we think is you want to be careful with. If you think a guy's kind of putt and hop, but realistically his conversion rate's just phenomenally high at 20 or 25 feet or more, there are guys, if you make a 40-foot putt, you're gaining 2.1 strokes on the field sometimes, because maybe it's a 3-foot average from that distance, and that can skew the numbers a little bit. Right. So if you see the conversion rates as their strokes gained putting is derived from making 5 to 10 footers, that's much more exciting and to us than a guy that just happens to roll a couple of bombs from 20 to 25 feet.
Yeah, and there's some value in knowing that too. I mean, guys like Jason Day a lot of times make their strokes or gain their strokes by making those bombs. I mean, that's how Jason Day wins tournaments a lot of times. So I guess it's interesting to think about things like strokes gained putting not being equal. I mean, one guy gaining a stroke putting does not necessarily equal another guy gaining a stroke putting, if that makes sense.
Yeah. The one thing we uncovered with Spieth, we were looking at, last year his percentage of putts from 20 to 25 feet and 25 feet and up are like double what they are right now. And he's still playing all right, but he's not having the year he had last year. And it's not sustainable to make 20 to 25 footers for birdie or to save par to keep rounds going. Like, listen, he's still one of the greatest, if not the best putter in the world right now. But, a lot of these guys can make putts from 5 to 10 feet. You can't get hot for the season. I mean, his numbers last year from 20 feet and above were embarrassing. It was like, I think the tour average was close to like 8 to 10%, and he was like 17, 18%. His average from 20 feet and above was more than double the tour average. I think it was something. Those aren't the exact numbers, but just to put it in perspective, it's something like that.
Yeah. And you see that sort of in watching the tournaments too. I mean, I think for you guys, you have tons of information and stats at your fingertips, and I know not everybody's that way, but I saw some of that statistically, but I saw more of it just by watching the tournaments. So for me, my projections are great, but I try and remind myself that you also have to pay attention to what's not included in the projections, and
100%.
some of that has to do with golfers changing. I could project I could project Jordan Spieth to win every tournament based on his 2015 stats all year, but realistically, is he the same golfer as he was last year? And guys like Phil Mickelson, sometimes, especially early on in the season, I had to ask myself, is that the case? Adam Scott, it appears as though that's not the case. You have transformed his game in some ways. When you're projecting based on past information, it's really, really important to sort of have that storyline as well. If there is one.
There's no doubt. We look at someone like Spieth. He's not driving the ball too accurately, and that's why you've seen he's had success. He played well at Kapalua. He played well at Augusta. Augusta he obviously likes, but you don't have to be a terribly accurate driver of the ball at Augusta. He's really been only playing well at courses that fit what he's doing well or not doing well, right now, which is how it worked for most golfers on tour. Unless you're him last year or Tiger for a decade, there's most of the time you're only going to have those big weeks a couple times a year, and they have a lot to do with your skill set, the course, a lot of variable factors that you can't always quantify, like you're saying. So.
Right. So talk about your method for kind of breaking it all down. You talked about not necessarily playing high volume, but let's say you're new to the game and you go on fantasygolfmetrics.com. What do you think the best way is to kind of absorb all that information and turn it into a winning cash lineup?
Well, and Bobby's on there chatting, and he'll listen because I know he'd love to chime in because this is kind of his foray. But what I'd say, at least what Bobby and I do individually, or when we're discussing things, is we like to key in on one or two guys that we just feel really strongly about. We do extend. We basically throw out a hypothesis on a guy. Like we look at the overarching thing and say the overarching numbers look good. Then we dig in, and obviously the tools we have. You're able to do that, and we just keep checking off. Like, does it make sense here? Does it make sense here? And once you find one or two guys that make sense everywhere, all of a sudden you can feel really comfortable about anchoring around them. And then it's about building value around those guys relative to ownership. That's kind of where we're at. Bobby's talked ad nauseum about just taking one of the lowest priced guys in a GPP and loading up the top five because we've seen in the $300 this year more than once 5 of 6 has won the GPP for $300. So. Yeah. If you get 6 of 6 through there, you're always going to get deep. Bobby's been top 10 twice in that event this year. I know he had one last year, but and I think this is going to help soon. It's something we're building right now. It's a player profile. So basically, you go on there and like some of other tools, you basically hit a drop down, you pick the player, and then it's going to be kind of a snapshot of just all of the pertinent data. Like, you're going to see their strokes gained round over round. You're going to see their recent events, their history at this course. We're basically working on a snapshot that I think is going to help people, like you're saying, do that work that I just said. Because, listen, it's not easy, especially if you're new to everything, to know what to look for when you're coming to our site. We try and do as good a job as we can to make it user-friendly, but there's just so much data out there that it can kind of become overwhelming. So we are trying to condense that, but by keying in on one or two people and then, deciding in that price tier if that's the right way to go ownership-wise, that's how we kind of start our decision-making process.
Sure. And I didn't mean that as a slight to your website by any means. I guess I just think there's some skill in taking information that's out there and finding a way to convert that to a winning lineup.
And that's why we're doing what we're doing, like this, and having these conversations, and doing the Periscope, and just putting out stuff on Twitter and talking to people. We don't send out a list of our picks or even post picks really. I mean, we moved to the class system because I didn't want our success defined by if our second ranked guy or first ranked guy made the cut when the next 10 guys had a really strong finish. We
Sure.
want to get people thinking about the process and not just, like you're saying, strict results. So that's why we put classes in place, because we can just say we feel strongly about this group of people, then this group, then this group, and there's reasons why we feel strongly. And taking the data, like you're saying, and trying to make decisions is what we're about. We're not here to tout. It's fun to come on these forums and have conversations because it allows me and Bobby to talk about guys we like and why we like them. But we like to stay away from the idea of saying, this is the guy you got to have this week, this is the guy you don't have to have. I mean, I've had Periscope sessions where people will just hound me on a guy, and I'm like, listen, if you like him, you can play him. I'm just going to tell you what I see. Like, I never want to be in a scenario where I tell someone to not take someone that they like, and then it costs them $100,000. Because we're not in that business. We're in the business right now of just having these conversations, and people say, no, that's the business you're in. You're picking. I'm like, yes and no. Like, we like having conversations. It's a hobby for us, but at the end of the day, like, we want it to be about people making their own decisions, which I think is, makes it the most fun. I mean, listen, everyone wants to make a ton of money, but what's the real enjoyment in just going online and getting fed the information, entering it, and if you win, you win. If you don't win, you don't win. But for us, it's like we want people included and thinking about things differently. It's why we came up with the putting splits. I mean, once we did the putting splits, I mean, I feel like that took off. Everyone loves looking at the gaps, and they're so noticeable for certain players. I mean, Jason Day, just want to be honest, Jason Day is not that good a putter on Bermuda. Like, it's pretty obvious. The split isn't as huge as others, but that, and there's the points gained against field and the points against field average. Those are things that we know people have jumped on a bit since we've kind of put it out there. It's just we're just excited about thinking about things differently. That's kind of what we like doing.
For me as a personally as a DFS player myself, that was part of what made me want to do projections myself and get into some of this, because I started up when I first started playing, kind of signing up for websites and sort of gathering in whatever information I could, and I think that's the sort of typical first response. But I have a statistical background, and I felt like there was some value in me trying to understand what is behind some of this, Yeah. And I think there's been not only a learning experience in terms of the stats themselves, but also in terms of lineup build. All of the lineup construction, everything else besides sort of having a crystal ball and guessing the right guys. There's so many other skills that go into this that have been easier to learn, I think, having sort of started from the ground up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many different ways to go about it, and even if you have a little bit of background, it's there's so many different angles to kind of attack it from. Obviously we're on an expert chat, but I don't feel like Bobby or I in any means an expert in straight statistical analysis. We think that we've found a good way to apply the data to certain trends and make observations based on it. But jump on. It's a good conversation. But I got a couple questions. I just want to make sure I'm jumping on here.
Sure.
I mentioned I don't mind the wind so much. Let's see, what did they say? So a lot of people
I rarely. Sorry, go ahead.
No. If you're going to talk about the wind, I don't really. I'm not that interested in the wind if it's not. If it's 15 miles per hour or less, like I'm not even thinking about it. That's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, and the thing that really put this into perspective was actually the other day I went golfing, and I pulled up the weather app I used to kind of to do my research, and I looked at it and it's like 18-mile-an-hour winds, and I'm thinking it's kind of a pleasant day. it's not like it sounds when you say 18 miles an hour. You know, it certainly affected my game, but to me, I don't know if there's as much to that. And I also think it's relative to the course as well. I mean, a big, wide-open course like St. Andrews, yeah, the wind is really going to affect you.
Yeah, I mean, listen, certain ball strikers are going to perform better. It's definitely, and I like, people always talk about the apex height, and I get it, but, there aren't many guys on tour that don't know how to flight the ball down. Like, it's not like they don't know it's windy, and they're going to hit it away, and then all of a sudden 20-mile-per-hour gust is going to come knock out their high apex. Like, they know it's windy. They're playing, like, I don't love apex height as an indicator on performance in wind. I get it, but it's not a bubble.
Yeah.
So,
right.
But I think really what the guys are asking is if that's going to be a factor that people do care about. How much do you consider ownership? Based on the wind. If you think it's going to be windy and you think people are going to be jumping off of a certain draw, how much does that affect it? And for me, it's not too much. I'm basing it more on just overall. Do I think someone's going to be owned? Do I think people feel this value somewhere? So like right now they're talking a lot about Kazire and who is it? Kazire and Lovemark. And yeah, I've seen a good amount of chatter on both of those guys. So let me bring on. So you had your what's it called? Your ownership there. So that's your breakdown. So you have a little bit of Kazire, which I imagine Kazire is going to be right around that number that you're at in terms of exposure.
Yep,
and,
I agree.
And Lovemark, you don't have any Lovemark, or at least a tiny bit of them. So I think that's interesting.
No Lovemark. So.
And he's a guy at Lovemark that I saw a couple things that I liked, but yeah, my guess is that Kazire is going to be a good amount more owned than Lovemark this week, just because of what people know about Kazire. I think the narrative of first-time winners might skew some people to pick players that are hyped. And Kazire is one of those guys. Like, he's coming off a good year. He's got the ability. He's having a decent rookie year. This is the type of course a guy like that wins. That's kind of how I think a lot of people approach an event like this that maybe aren't, as savvy or looking into it as much. So, and there's a lot of guys like that. I mean, my guy like that right now, and this is just in the last half hour of researching before coming on here, I like Reeve this week. I mean, he's been playing well all year, and I've been kind of on and off in different weeks. But based on the numbers that I looked at, especially with the round-by-round data, he's a guy right now that I'm really excited about. He's putting the ball okay, satisfactory, but he is just striking it like an animal. The only problem with Reeve is the course history, but he's only 2 of 6 cuts made here, so it does concern me. I'm someone that generally favors course history more than I should. If I take that into consideration, it's still not that good. It's Bobby's bigger on inform with course experience. I like being able to show success at the course. So that's my only concern with Reeve, but I love everything else about him. Rifers is another guy, and this is kind of all in the same price range. That's why I was there. Reeve and Rifers in that range. That's kind of, who I'm liking. Rifers 6 to 8, 2 or 3 here, so he's not overwhelming on either end. I think the value is strong. He's 7.51 points gained against his price. Those are kind of the mid-range guys we're keen on. One of the questions earlier was who are the guys that we're anchoring around. Again, I'm not sure on the high-end guy who's going to be my most owned. Right now we basically have the top 3 guys as our as our first class. Our first class is like 5 to 7 people. This week, the way the distribution broke down, we just have it as those 3 guys, and like the 3 names. But Charles Howell, again, he's having as much of a dream season as you could have without a win. Playing extremely well. I don't know. I'm kind of confused by his ownership. I feel like 8,700 is a relatively fair price. I mean, the points gained against price is is pretty good. He's averaging over 6 points more, so you'd feel comfortable probably around 9,000. But I don't know. I feel like Charles Howell has never really gotten the respect. I mean, he got it a couple of weeks ago. I know he was owned a little over 20%, but if you told me Charles Howell was going to be 15% owned this week, I'd feel good about that. I think I'd feel okay.
Yeah, Zach and I were just having a conversation about this in the last one, and neither of us really were comfortable putting a number on it because I've been off on CH3 most of the year. Most guys I have a pretty good feeling for. I don't know, I don't know how well I could predict it, but CH3 is one that I feel like I've had a pretty decent margin of error in terms of his ownership percentage pretty regularly, and I'm not sure what's behind that. I don't know if it's just something that it's hard for me to quantify by reading, and I do a lot of the same things that everybody else does, trying to figure out ownership. But CH3 seems hard to pinpoint for me for whatever reason this year.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of like if I am someone that cares about touting ownership, I'll just say he's going to be 15% because he might be 10 to 12, he might be 18 to 20 for this whole season. You'll probably pretty average-wise. But apparently Zach loves that I mentioned Reeves and Richter, so probably going to have to be auto fades now. But let's see, hold on. What did I know one of the guys asked about Castro, and I saw a little bit of interesting.
Oh, there was a question earlier about approaches from greater than 200 and
So
long par threes this week.
Yeah, so the thing, real quick, so just because I have Castro in front of me, Castro is striking the hell out of the ball and putting like an idiot. So it's kind of not, it's kind of where he's at. So I don't mind getting behind him on the week where we're just, obviously we're just caring more about the ball striking. But yeah, let's talk about the yardages. I mean, the yardage gap that we keyed in on was 175 to 200. We didn't make it a huge factor or anything, a small percentage of our key stats, but overall proximity factored, but it didn't factor enough to make it a key stat. The one spot in that range was 175 to 200, and I think it's interesting because you guys see the course and it's 7,400 yards, but it's not really. There's a couple 350-yard holes, there's a couple 500-yard holes. That seems to be where we've settled in, not greater than 200 because of the par threes. And par three scoring didn't have any different type of regression analysis for us than it does in other weeks. Rarely does par threes come into play. I think it came into play at Career Builder, I want to say, was the only time we had that as a key stat, but I can't remember exactly. But yeah, I mean, going based on it being more than 200 yards, we're not too concerned for the par threes on that. Listen, it's something to look at, but as far as the numbers broke down, 175 to 200, if you're going to pick one of those gaps, had the most effect on DraftKings points when we ran the regressions over the past 9 seasons at this course.
And 200-plus yard par threes are not as uncommon as you would think on the PGA Tour. I think if you were to look back historically, I would bet a big percentage of these par threes that these guys are playing over 200. It's not that uncommon.
And what's interesting is it's rare that 175 to 200 or 200 or more shows up in our regressions because we run our regressions off of DraftKings points, not say finishing position or just or money or playing well. So when people see that there's a range when we do our shot dispersion, oh my God, everything's 200 plus. It doesn't mean that you need to be good there to perform well in DraftKings because it's not likely, and I've gone over this in the past, it's not likely that people are birdieing when they're 200 yards or more. And you want to par, you want to perform well, but listen, I'll take a guy that shoots even par by going birdie par for 18 straight holes than a guy that makes 18 straight pars because we're playing DraftKings points. If we were gonna, that's why we run a different model for our betting. I change the numbers to more of a finishing position approach when I run the numbers for our betting tab because no one cares about DraftKings points. So why would I use a model for betting that's DraftKings points
Yep.
when you compare. So that's kind of when people are talking about DraftKings and they say 200 yards or more. It's not often that 200 yards or more is going to help determine a variance in DraftKings points. Back in the chat here.
That's interesting.
So, couldn't aggregation of past results and course history to be used to run simple correlation to multiple directions to shed some standard light on the course history debate.
So are you guys doing hypothesis testing on your variables to determine whether they're significant? You talk about having certain significant variables.
If they're not significant, they don't even get brought into the conversation. It's why some weeks we only have 5 and not 6. Right. How we have our template up, we try and roll with 6. Usually we can find a good amount in there, but yeah, I mean, early on in the week, I mean, this is the most we've had a total weight of strokes gained tee to green and strokes gained putting. I think we had a total of 65%, I want to say, and it's because that's where all of it was. I mean, this is the T stat on all the other categories was just so low, barely significant in most categories, and only a couple of them they kind of breached that number. So this was a tough week for us to kind of give you an edgy key stats approach. I mean, I feel like I get excited when I run the regression, and I talk to Zach about this, and certain things that don't come up because it's like, hey, now it's really interesting because something that's not the norm is coming into play this week, and that's when it gets a lot more fun for people that are playing with data like us.
Yeah, and I think that's where you gain an advantage too in a lot of cases. I mean, if strokes gained putting and strokes gained tee to green were the only thing that ever showed up as significant in our projection models, do we really have that much of an advantage? Probably, I would suspect probably not. Yeah. And that's already what everyone's looking at, if that makes sense.
Oh, of course. And then to jump back in, I was just reading. They're talking about the course history conversation. Yeah, so you can. It's really hard to test with significance the course history debate that we've had. We are going to start looking at the form of players going in to just kind of create a baseline, but it's a little bit of work. So until we have things developed in the database, I mean, and it's not just like Excel stuff that we're doing, it's going to be tough to do the deeper kind of tests. But I don't know with a ton of confidence that you can prove one way or the other statistically. But again, I just struggle as someone who plays golf, who's played, I played college baseball, I played basketball. Just the environment around you matters. Like you do better in certain places, and of all the sports, golf is the most variable, and it's just like the idea that someone doesn't perform better at a place for a slew of reasons. It just I can't wrap my head around it. The thought process there. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's also important to remember that it's not a linear yes or no question necessarily either. I mean, it's easy to say yes, course history is relevant, or no, course history is not. But realistically, we don't live in a world that's a yes or no question. I mean, we don't live in a black and white world. So, are there cases that course history is relevant? Almost definitely. But does that mean that it's predictive? Not necessarily. I mean, it also doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to lead to a profitable fantasy advantage, if that makes sense. So I don't know. I mean, with all the with all the Twitter debate and all that, I mean, it's really easy in a few characters to say this is not a real thing or it's a real thing, but realistically.
Well, that's the problem. I have,
situational. I mean,
I have a problem making definite statements when you can't explain them because you have 140 characters. Like, I mean, I've taken to typing up on my phone in the notepad and then taking a screenshot and then posting that picture just so I can say what I want to say, because it doesn't do anyone a whole lot of good to kind of say this is how we feel and one blurb about why, because it doesn't really explain anything. So
Mm-hmm.
You know, we feel course history matters. I don't have a study that shows it definitely does, but this is our opinion, and that's that. Like we're not claiming to have solved the debate. It's just we're going to be honest about how we feel.
Yeah. Well, and for what it's worth, based on my process, it's been profitable to assume that course history is relevant to a certain point. So, you know, when I look back at course history and see that a guy has 8, 9 straight made cuts with a bunch of top 25s and a bunch of top 10s, it's been profitable for me to assume that there's a higher likelihood that that guy is going to perform well again in the future. And I've said this before, I don't necessarily choose a guy based on course history, but you know, Charlie Hoffman was a great example. We talked about this in the chat with Zach earlier. You know, Charlie Hoffman stood out in my projections last week, and when you look at his projections and then I look at his course history there, to me that was a perfect time for me to be extremely confident in my projection, if that makes sense.
I mean,
and I'm sure there's some fallacies built into that, but you know, I've piled on Charlie Hoffman and have done that sort of thing this year, all year, and it's been fairly profitable in most cases.
100%. I mean, the converging trends were just unreal. I mean, you had him, we had him number 1 in the guide. I had him for all the way to one and dones. It's just, if you're going to take Charlie Hoffman, that's the week. Like, it didn't add up any better. And it's really nice when it works out that way. It doesn't always.
Yeah.
It is really nice when it does. And the thing about course history for us is we haven't been able to prove this either, but it's just, you know, it's a hypothesis that we're kind of like discussing. Bobby and I feel that course history has a pretty strong relation to ownership. You know, people will just see that someone's had success somewhere, so they assume that's success. So by jumping off of those people, we're kind of arguing against ourselves, but I mean, at the same time, you know, you just expect people to choose someone who's 100% cuts made somewhere than someone who's not. So, like, I expect Chesreavy not to be incredibly owned this week because he's 2 of 6. But listen, this is as well as, you know, Chesreavy's been bouncing around for a while. People don't realize that. This is as well as Chesreavy's ever been playing. So when it's scenarios like that, that's when, like you're saying, you have to step back from what's right in front of you on the page and realize what's really happening around you. Because Chesreavy's having the best year of his career, and that's a scenario where 2 of 6 cuts made doesn't really matter as much to me. That being said,
for what it's worth, Chesreavy, I'm going to help you. I said, for what it's worth, Chesreavy scares me a lot this week.
Fair enough. You know, I mean, listen, I don't have enough lineups to say, you know, he's not going to be owned in all of them, but I'm going to have some. If I do, let's say I have reserve, because the problem now is Bobby and I are both in New York, so like Tuesday, Wednesday morning, I have to log in, you know, remote connect to a computer in New Jersey to submit my lineups. And I, you know, it's a pain to reserve all those. So like, I think we both probably, I think I reserved about 15 lineups for both of us across different events. So, you know, right now, listen, and you know, I might change my mind on this. I'm probably looking at 4 lineups with Reavy, maybe 5. So not tremendous, but like, you know, 5 of 15, you know, 33%. That's where I'm at now. I mean, if I look and I don't like as much, I might not go there, but that's kind of how I'm feeling. Just as a last bookend to that course history comment, I have been riding the Luke Donald theory I've had all year because he has not missed a cut at places that he's 100% cuts made this year. So I will ride that. I have to look. I don't know if he has any more places that he's 100% cuts made over the past, you know, decade or so, or the sample size we're looking at. But I've ridden that one to perfection. So, and everyone and it's funny because everyone's like, oh, Luke Donald can't play anymore, but he's playing pretty well this year.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because, you know, the point you're making also tells me that every golfer is not equal. I mean, it's just another non-black and white variable that goes into this course history debate because when you look at guys like Charlie Hoffman and Luke Donald who have this course history at certain courses that's really prominent, there are also guys who are counterpoints that have very little correlation or very little pattern in where they do well,
Yeah. Certainly some guys have a correlation with course history. Some guys they don't. It's not easy to just say like some guys will just play well when they're playing well. Some guys will just play well when they're only playing places they like playing. It's that simple. You can't pinpoint. I mean, in theory, we could come out with a profile that says this is a course history player, this is a forum player, this is a streaky putter player. Like guys, that play well in these scenarios. And honestly, just talking about it out loud, I'm surprised we haven't gone and done that because technically we could. I mean, we could look at guys that have only had success when, they've been hot putters that maybe aren't hot putters their whole life. Like, that's how you gotta look at it. Every person's gonna have success for different reasons.
Sure.
So, man, you're on what? You're just rounding out hour 2 of this right now?
Yeah, I love it, man. I didn't get to jump on the podcast this week because I wasn't feeling too well, but I was like coming into it. I was all excited. I was warming up all day. I was getting all my info ready. I was excited about it. I could sit and just talk golf and stats and all of it. I'm just a huge nerd.
Yeah, it's fun because there's just so much of it. Like it's not like it's not so finite. There's just so much to discuss.
Yeah. Well, and ultimately, I play more volume than you guys do. Not necessarily more money. I wouldn't. I mean, I don't know, but to me, I think there's something to putting a pile of lineups in and figuring out what's the optimal way of exposing yourself to different golfers and upside and downside.
Yeah, I mean,
it's an equation that's not solved in my mind, but it's something I strive for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Every single week, I'm like, Bobby, can we just do 200 lineups? But to be honest, I don't talk about it much. I'm assuming you guys know this, or at least get it to an extent. It's a lot of work to put out what we put out each week. It's a hobby for us, and we're looking to develop more and more. By the time I get through, now our conversation here, which is phenomenal, through my Periscope, it's 11 o'clock. All I've done for my non-working hours is stare at data, and it's like I'm putting together 10 to 15 lineups that I feel good about. I can't pump out that many lineups efficiently. That's my problem.
Yeah.
If I wasn't doing this more publicly, I'd probably do more lineups. But this is fun because I know that we're providing a service that just isn't out there to people. So listen, if Bobby and I didn't have real-time careers, then we'd probably be approaching it differently. But it's still a hobby for us. So but at the end of the day, like we want to put together our lineups, we want to try and win, but I can't get myself to put together that many lineups unless I have some sort of automated tool or something like that.
Yeah.
How do you do it? I mean, how
well, and I can speak.
Lineup guy?
What's that?
Are you a max lineup guy? You throw in 200 lineups in like the $3?
So I usually build 50 to 100 lineups, and I'm not quite up to the $3 yet. So I do a whole bunch of satellites. I do the quarter arcade. I do the $1, and then sometimes if there's a decent payout structure in a $2 tournament, I'll hop in that.
Gotcha.
I'm a bankroll nit. What's that?
How are you making that many lineups?
So I started out doing it manually, and it sounds like sort of your approach to everything is similar to mine. I started actually manually copying and pasting data from the PGA Tour Stats website when I first started this. I found some help, and my brother is a little more computer savvy than I, so he helps me out a little bit. But in terms of building lineups, I started that manually as well. I got Moosonomic's spreadsheet pretty early on when he first started coming out with the lineup manager, and I I borrowed his code. I don't distribute my spreadsheet or anything like that, so it was just kind of a handiness type thing. Developed his code for my spreadsheet, and so I use that. And then recently, I've been using the fantasyfanatics.com. They have a lineup generator that works really well, actually. I was a little bit, I don't know, I don't want to say I was pessimistic, but I wasn't really sold on the result of lineup generators.
Yeah.
But his lineup generator is really customizable. You can pick and choose your ownership exposure, and you can opt in and out of different lineups if you don't like a certain combination, and it's worked really well. I've used that for the past probably 4 or 5 weeks, and I didn't start out necessarily piling in tons of lineups either. So as I've grown my bankroll and as I've kind of developed further and further into this whole thing, I've advanced the number of lineups as well. It'll be interesting to see though, because as you get into some of the higher buy-ins, you can put more in. So as I get into the $3 buy-in, I'm kind of wondering how much it's going to change my process to put in 200 lineups versus 50. Does the 200th lineup have the same EV as the first lineup? Is the question I ask myself.
Yeah.
And the answer is probably no, but it's hard to quantify that.
No, it's definitely that's an interesting way to kind of look at it. It's like, well, it's kind of the conversation I have when I decide I'm going to do satellites. Like, I just realized when I'm having this conversation that I decided this week I was going to reserve a bunch of satellites for the U.S. Open Millie Maker, and I'd be interested in someone explaining to me why I wouldn't just go with one lineup in a satellite, because I'm not looking to get just, I'm not trying to spread my way to get to the top. I'm trying to get as many as possible, and if that one lineup is the lineup, then I'm going to get all of them with it. That's kind of my thought with satellites.
Yeah.
What do you feel about that?
So the thing with that is you're talking about a very high variance approach. So that's fine. I think on paper that sounds great, but for me, I tend to spread my exposure in satellites depending on the format. It sounds like you're talking about like a big GPP satellite,
well,
like quarter buy-in or something.
It's the $3 for the $20 Millie Maker. So it's like 7,000.
Okay, yeah.
Like what, 1,200?
Right. Yeah. So that's probably not a bad strategy. The question is, in the number of weeks leading up to the Millie Maker, do you hit one? For me, I'd rather expose myself to multiple lineups and ensure that I get some tickets than go 4 or 5 weeks or whatever it is till the Millie Maker. Probably less than that now, isn't it? But I'd rather have some tickets than all of them, I guess. Does that make sense? It's basically whether or not you want to take on the variance of having one lineup.
I guess it's the mindset, because the way I look at it, I'm going to play the Millie Maker regardless a certain amount of tickets. Can I get them for cheap? So like, can I get them all now? Yeah. I guess it's a mindset. If you're just looking to get a couple tickets, yeah, I get what you're saying there. For me, it's like, if I don't win, I'm still gonna buy probably the same amount, but the idea of cash, listen, if I hit 10 this week, it's like I got $10, $20 tickets if I hit it with one lineup. So
right. Well, my GPP exposure. Okay, so my GPP exposure is pretty high variance in general too. So like, what I'll do is I'll take my 50 lineups and spread them across some smaller buy-in tournaments too. So like, like last week, I had a pretty good week. I won 11 tickets, but that was adopting the same strategy that I put in my 50 lineups into the quarter entry, 50 lineups into the $1 entry satellite, and then a whole bunch of smaller, like the $3 20-person satellite, those type of things. So I think that it's sort of balanced, but it's also high variance in the fact that the lineup construction I have is high variance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, 100%. You can definitely win with a bunch of tickets with different lineups too. It's not mutually exclusive, obviously. So
Right.
it works. It can work both ways.
Yeah. Well, I think we got to just about wrap it up.
Yeah, I think. I mean, it's funny. I mean, it's a little obviously different this week, but you and I have kind of been talking, and then Bobby's been in the chat. So like, Bobby's been answering some questions. People have been commenting. What we've been saying. It's been. I kind of like the format. I hope the guys that were chatting in there also like it. So, thanks for jumping in here, helping out with everything. So.
No problem. It was a blast. Like I said, I could talk all day and all night about this stuff. I love it.
Cool. Listen, do me a favor. Can you just tag me for that link of Fantasy Fanatics?
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat here.
So.
Yeah, it really is. It's I think $5 a week or whatever, and it's a really well built website. It's got a lot of information on there. Some of it's free, some of it is.
I'll give it a shot. Just in terms of lineup maker, just see what that's like.
Oh, and I learned that you can refer people, so type my name in if you end up paying for it.
Gotcha.
I guess there's a way to do that. I don't know. That's not why I'm touting them, but.
Oh, of course. Listen, we're all in this together.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Oh, you sent it right there too. Cool.
Yep, there's a link, so you guys hop in there and give it a look.
Yeah, with that, I guess we're signing off. So, Brad, thanks for jumping on. Everyone else out there, we're going to be jumping over to the Periscope in a little bit, probably about 20, 30 minutes. I just got to take the dog out first. Obviously, hit us up on Twitter, FG Metrics, and talk to you guys later.
All right. Thanks, guys. See ya.